Alright everybody, thank you for joining me on this live stream. We have a lot of cool stories to discuss. So we'll be discussing SpaceX's ninth Starship test flight, historic images of the solar south pole by a European Space Agency probe, commercial space stations, everything that's going to be going on with that and more. So let's get into it. So let's start off with the Starship Test Flight 9. And I'll also touch on the explosion that happened a couple days ago that's going to impact Starship Test Flight 10. But we'll get into that at the tail end of this story. So let's talk about this. So the ninth Starship test flight lifted off at 6:37 p.m. on May 30th. It was a historic test flight. It made a lot of progress and a lot of things that seem to have stayed the same. So let's discuss that. So this was the first test flight to reuse a super heavy booster, which obviously is historic, and they eventually want to catch and reuse the Starship spacecraft as well. However, as we're going to discuss with this flight, it's probably further off than they would want. So this is an image of, I have too many images here, so it's hard to, so let's just, that's not what I wanted. So that's the image of everything that happened with this. Let me see if I can actually, where is it? Nope. There we go. So this is an image of everything that happened during that flight. So you can see, or everything that was supposed to happen, rather. Not everything that they wanted to happen actually happened. So let's discuss that. So what happened, it lifted off, it cleared the pad, all of that. The problems really started happening after second engine cutoff, stage separation, hot staging. So they did, hot staging went well, and then after that, things really went south. So let's talk about that. So what happened was, so the stages separated, the super heavy booster continued on its way back to the launch site. The Starship, the upper stage, went up into space, and then things deteriorated. They ended up losing the booster, both the booster and the Starship. But so they lost the booster, and then the Starship was continuing, and they ended up losing attitude control of that. So that's basically, they just could not control the vehicle. There were some milestones that they were going to try to achieve, though. Everything, obviously, that they wanted to achieve on the last flight, and some more. So they did the historic first reflight of a booster, which is awesome. Hopefully there's more progress on that front, obviously. And then they also wanted to do some different things, like they wanted to do a Raptor relay. They wanted to do payload deployment of Starlink simulators, so basically dummy Starlink satellites, because obviously they're not going to fly real Starlink satellites yet, because this is not a fully operational vehicle. They're just testing it, so they don't want to lose those. So these were dummy Starlink satellites. There were 10 of them, but they were unable to deploy them because the payload door would not actuate or open and direct itself properly. So it wouldn't open properly. So they were unable to deploy those satellites. The other thing they were unable to do is they were unable to do a relight of the Raptor engine. So, and then they lost the attitude control of the vehicle, and it ended up blowing up. They lost it somewhere over the Indian Ocean. So that's unfortunate, but there are a lot of things that were learned. So now let's discuss what was happening with the Flight 10, what was going to happen. So there had obviously been a lot of delays with this. So because of everything also that had happened with Flight 9, and there were some other things, but the delays are going to get even longer because of what happened on Thursday. So on Thursday, June 19th, what was going to be the vehicle for Flight 10 exploded during testing. So this was actually, SpaceX believes they've traced the issue to a nitrogen leak, which, as Elon pointed out, would be the first ever anomaly of this type for this system. So that's very interesting. That's a very interesting detail there. So they obviously have to build and test a whole another vehicle. I'm not quite sure how far along they are with building another vehicle, but regardless, this is going to be a delay of probably at least a couple weeks. And even so, like, they had just started testing this vehicle, so now they have to build or finish building, depending on how far along they are, another vehicle, and then go through testing again. So it could be as much as a month. Or more. I mean, I don't really know any of that. So, but it's definitely going to be a notable delay. So that was what happened on the Starship test flight. And now they're basically back to pretty much a standstill. They're having to build a whole nother Starship. So that's going to delay the whole program a bit until the next flight. So now that we talked about that, let's talk about, is it this one? That's not what I wanted. Nope. Technical difficulties. I have so many images. This is kind of ridiculous. Mars 2026. There we go. So let's talk about Mars 2026. So this is Elon Musk and SpaceX's big plan. Let me see real quick. I will be back just so you can see this. So this is their big plan to send, not humans yet, but humans soon, hopefully, but they're sending starships, Optimus robots, which is, I guess, technically Tesla's new robot that they're developing. They're on Gen 3 with that, a humanoid robot. It's very interesting. They've made a lot of progress. So that's a whole interesting other thing. But they're going to send those, and they're going to send Cybertrucks. So first of all, when would this potentially happen. So the next Mars opposition is in September of 2026. So they would try to launch during that window, or otherwise it would be delayed, because opposition is, we talk about it being like the best time to view an object, but that's because the object is closest to Earth, so it's biggest and brightest. So for space exploration purposes, that means it's the shortest travel time and distance. So that's why they try to launch during that window, because it expends the least amount of fuel, and so they can carry the most cargo and potentially people or whatever they're carrying. So that's why they would want to launch during this window. So that has always seemed incredibly ambitious. I mean, even uncrewed missions, let alone, humans, and they're supposedly going to launch 5 of them when they can't even currently get a vehicle out of Earth's atmosphere and back properly. I mean, that's not really a knock on them. Obviously, we knew that this was going to be hard. It's hard developing any new system, and let alone, spaceflight is hard. So that's, they're just going through developing this vehicle, and they've done so much in such little time. It's really incredible. This was just always an ambitious goal, and it's fine to have ambitious goals, but just realizing that this is an aspiration, not something that's really going to happen necessarily, most likely. Obviously, we're not there yet, but it seems highly unrealistic, particularly given where the program is right now. So, the next opposition is in 2029, so I think that is a much more realistic goal. Starship should certainly be well operational then and be doing other missions, hopefully commercial missions, hopefully other missions. There's the Dear Moon mission that was with a Japanese businessman. He was going to take some artists up to go around the moon. That has been delayed due to development issues with the Starship program. I don't know if it's technically been canceled, but at least it's been indefinitely delayed. So we'll see what happens with that, but hopefully they get many more commercial missions once this becomes operational. I would say 2027-ish timeframe, sometime in 2027 for it to become operational is most likely, but we'll see. But they do seem to be having a lot of issues. But it is good, obviously, for them to have these goals. And there's nobody else that's trying to do something like this. So it's incredible, really, what they're trying to do. I mean, except China, and even China's not doing something really on this level. Although China's also more secretive. So, but let's see this. And let's go on 1 second. And then we'll go on to the next story. So now let's talk about, I'm going to go through all of the images here, not that one. It's a little ridiculous. I have so many images. So now let's talk about commercial space stations. So this is an overview, if I can get the image, there we go, of all of the commercial space stations. That's all of the ones in development, which is kind of ridiculous. And we're going to be talking about the likelihood of each one of these really happening and where they are in development, and talk about some of the companies. So Orbital Reef, that's Blue Origin's, that's in development. I'm going to be mainly focusing currently on VAST, both Haven 1, and I'll look forward to the Starship station, and also a Starship-based station on here, which is VAST, but can also be other ones, obviously, that are in development. And then the Axiom station. So there's lots of different ones here. There's NASA's Lunar Gateway, there's Blue Origin's Orbital Reef, there's the Axiom station, there's VAST's Haven 1 and Haven 2 stations. There's the Starship class station, there's a Starship base station. There's also Starlab, which is, I believe, a Boeing station. So there's all sorts of different ones, and now we're going to talk about really where each one is. So if you saw videos over the past week, it was a few days ago, but Haven 1, VAST recently announced the Haven 1 system. They're in, like, finishing up, I guess it's not even development, they've developed it, and they're going to launch next year to try to get that NASA contract to replace the International Space Station. So that's very interesting there, and let's see, here we go. So this is VAST. It was founded just in 2021 by Jed McCaleb. They do a lot of their testing in the Mojave Desert in California. So they're trying to create a future where lots of people live and work in space. So very much, like Blue Origin, also like Axiom. So they're really trying to develop this low Earth orbit and outer space economy, which is super cool. And that's fueled by these companies like Blue Origin. NASA helps with that, but mostly right now, SpaceX. So let's talk about just general development and how likely I think that all of these are going to happen. So Haven 1 obviously is happening. So they were going to do, VAST was going to do like a demo mission, but it seems like right now they've scrapped that and are just going straight to Haven 1 and then Haven 2 at Starship class station, which I believe may be Haven 2, but Haven 2 is going to be the first station that actually has crew on it. So the way they're going to do it is it's going to be a crew of, I believe, 4, and they're going to have one astronaut, like certified astronaut on it. So and someone that has been on the International Space Station, or not the International, has been on space stations. So just for safety reasons, so that's good. Now let's talk about the Axiom station. So this was won by Axiom Space, who, if you've been keeping up with it, has been doing a lot with SpaceX. They've been doing a lot. They've most recently, I believe it was the Axiom 4 mission, going into space. So that one is going to happen in the future. Now, Boeing's Starlab. This is one from Boeing and Northrop Grumman. That we'll see. I do believe, at least I hope, that will happen in the future. But who knows? I mean, if you've been following their Starliner program, that hasn't gone well. So we'll see. But that, hopefully it does happen. Hopefully we have lots of these different space stations in space. So that's very interesting. And Axiom, of course, I was going to highlight this. Where is it? There is a lot of noise in the background, unfortunately. So that's a picture of, I believe it's Blue Origin's orbital reef. Or, no, that's the Axiom station. There we go. Blue Origin's orbital reef is next. So that's the proposed Axiom station. That's unfortunately a low quality image, but anyway. You know what? One second. I'm going to try something. Okay, I will be back. What? Okay. Okay, so I tried putting headphones on. We'll see if that works any better. So that's the Blue Origin, or that's the Axiom station. So now, that's all of the commercial stations. I do believe the NASA Lunar Gateway, given the Artemis program and all of that, where that is what Trump's trying to do with NASA, I believe that's the least likely to happen. If it does happen, it might not be around the moon. So we'll see. But yeah, so let's go on. Actually, now I'll check the chat. So there we go. I'm trying to keep up with the chat and do this. Okay. So there is not. Okay. I don't know. I've never really had a live chat like this before, so I didn't know if there was like a way to do it, because I'm using OBS, so I don't know if, can't find a way to see the live chat in here without going over to YouTube. So okay, so let's talk about where is it? There we go. So that's all of the commercial space stations, Mars 2026. So now, lastly, let's go over, this is not displaying, right? Yes. So now, well, actually, no, I guess I will touch on this here. So this was something also, I didn't load an image for this. So let me do that real quick. Because I can only have so many, I think I can only have like 4 stories with the title. So, because of YouTube's title rules. So let's see, I'm gonna get a picture. There we go. So I was going to do a video on this, but I'll just cover it in the live stream. That's easier. So let's talk about Jared Isaacman. So if you've heard any of the news, he is no longer going to be Trump's nominee for NASA administrator. And I touched on this in a tweet, which, that's the other thing. Let me do, where's the text box? There we go. So that if y'all want to follow me over on Twitter or X or whatever, so it's at Orbit Insights. So, yeah, so, and this is really unfortunate. I did also both a Twitter post and a post in the community tab on YouTube about this. I think this is really a bad sign. Trump said that he looked through Jared's political history and he leans more towards Democrats, and we shouldn't have Democrats running NASA when there's a Republican in the White House. I mean, you know, they all serve at the pleasure of the president. I just feel like, I mean, when has Jared ever really been political? And also, regardless, I mean, you know, Trump didn't really go into how Jared's vision would have been different from Trump's vision, so that some more clarity would have been helpful with this whole situation. Because, as I said, I mean, Jared Isaacman is the most qualified and just overall best person that could have run NASA. Obviously, Elon Musk can't do it because he has SpaceX. So outside of Elon Musk, Jared was really the best person with all of his different experience. He started businesses. He's an astronaut. He's also flown fighter jets. And so he also co-founded a company. It's called, I believe, Draken Aerospace. That is like a private air force. So that's interesting. And yeah, he founded his first company, Shift4, which is an electronics payment system, when he was 16, so that's super cool. So overall, I think this is a huge loss just because of how I think he would have changed NASA. He would have canceled the SLS, which still seems like it's going to happen because of NASA's proposed budget cuts, and then also canceling the SLS. And just, I feel like he really would have downsized NASA and gotten them back to their mission of deep space exploration and really just changed the culture, which I think it's been sorely needed at NASA, arguably since like the 1970s or so. So just after the moon landing, we did that, and that was the big thing for NASA. We should have, after the moon landing, we should have stayed there and built on from that, and we should have been to Mars decades ago. But, you know, technology aside, but we had technology to go to the moon, and then we just abandoned that. So I feel like that's it's unfortunate. I mean, who knows if it would, how realistic it would be, going to Mars decades ago with that technology. But there were roadmaps for that, and then we abandoned the Apollo program. So that really is unfortunate. That's honestly, unfortunately, what happens when science or scientific endeavors are rooted in politics. Then whoever's in charge changes, and that can, kill the program. So it's unfortunate. I do think that Jared would have been the best pick for NASA. I think there are a lot of changes, a lot of downsizing, eliminating bureaucracy, culture changes, and collaboration more with the private sector, and just getting NASA back to ambitious exploration that really needs to be being done. And I feel like he was the best person, maybe the only person to really do that. But we'll see who Trump picks next. I'm going to check the chat again. Okay, so chat seems to be going well. All right, so lastly, let's talk about, where is it? Trying to find, there we go. So, oh, actually it's not that one. That one, there we go. Okay. So, the sun's south pole. So, earlier this week, the European Space Agency, with its solar orbiter, it's literally just called the solar orbiter. It's kind of a dumb name, but it's called the solar orbiter. That's their spacecraft that's orbiting the sun. Points for creativity, I guess. So, the spacecraft got the first ever images of the solar south pole. So that's very interesting. It's crazy that, it's been 4.5 billion years. Obviously, humans haven't been around for 4.5 billion years, but the sun has existed for 4.5 billion years. Humans have been around for a long time too, and we haven't gotten anything like this. This is the first time. So that's all very, very interesting. And hopefully more comes from this. Hopefully we can learn more from this, because this can tell us more about solar cycles, how the sun works, and we can better predict events if we know about all of the sun. So, yeah, that was kind of a wrap up there. And hopefully there's more missions like this. Unfortunately, with what's happening with NASA, there are some smaller missions. Like there was a Mars sample return mission, which that would have been awesome. Hopefully hopefully it's done more by private companies. It was supposed to be a NASA mission. It was going to be a smaller mission. I believe it was only like 100 million price tag, so it was small. But that would have been historic and just really cool if that happened. But hopefully a private company, maybe, someone who's partnering with SpaceX, maybe they'll do that. And hopefully we also have more launch vehicles. The Blue Origin's New Glenn is in development. They had their first flight, but obviously it's coming along. They've had a lot of delays. They had their first flight. They're going to do more flights this year, I believe, in next year. And we'll see. Hopefully they become really a competitor for SpaceX. The issue is a lot of people seem to have a misconception, at least that I've seen online, that they're competing, that Blue Origin's and New Glenn is competing with Starship. It is not. It is competing with the Falcon 9. And because of where SpaceX is developing Starship, they've basically stopped making Falcon 9s simply because they don't need to, because it's at least mostly reusable. And they keep landing them and then they refly them. And they can refly for, I believe it's something like 20 times at least is the record. Actually, no, I think it's like 25 some. So it's crazy, it's a lot, and so they rarely actually have to make new Falcon 9s anymore because of how reusable at least the majority of the spacecraft is. So that's very fascinating, and so hopefully Blue Origins can really be a competitor to SpaceX, and hopefully they can get a Starship class rocket after they figure out New Glenn and figure out reusability with that, and that becomes reliable. So I will be having more updates on all of that, but that was just a relatively long live stream about all that's been going on with spaceflight. So more videos next week. I'm going to do individual videos about going more in depth about each of these space stations. So, I mean, as you can see, that's a lot of space stations. So there's a lot, and I'll be doing individual videos. It'll be a series about each of them. Lunar Gateway, as I said, I feel is the least likely to happen. So that was just a quick overview of everything that's been going on. Let me check the chat one last time. Yeah, so, and thank you all for joining. All right, so share your thoughts down below. Make sure to subscribe for more content. I hope to be doing these live streams, hopefully once a week or so, depending on my schedule with other things. So thank you for joining, and I will see you in another live stream or video. So bye.